Welcome to Season 4 of the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we discuss business agility through customer experience, employee experience, and digital transformation. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at gregkihlstrom.com and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kihlstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile Brand podcast. While podcasting really began in the early 2000s, it's grown dramatically over the last several years. According to some recent statistics, 62% of the U.S. population ages 12 plus have listened to a podcast, with over one-third, or about roughly 104 million people listening regularly. And that's just in the United States alone. Podcasts come in many shapes and sizes and can be an incredibly effective marketing platform for brands, influencers, and for others. Today, we're going to talk about the future of podcasting with someone who has been at the center of this movement since he founded his company in 2015. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Josh Nielsen, founder and CEO of Zencaster. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg. Happy to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about this with you. Why don't we get started by giving a little background on yourself before you founded Zencaster?
Before I founded Zencaster. All right. Jumping back a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll get to Zencaster in a second, but yeah.
I grew up in Texas, lived there till I was about 16, and then I moved all over the Western United States. I've lived a little bit outside of the country in places like Australia, New Zealand, and Thailand. And now I am located in Salt Lake City and love living in the mountains.
Nice. So yeah, let's dive in here and start with a little background on podcasting itself. So, while it's extremely popular now, there were technically podcasts back in the early 2000s, though they weren't nearly as popular with such a broad demographic. What do you think brought about such a rise in popularity over the last several years?
Well, I can tell you what happened because I watched it happen. When I started building Zencaster, there was nowhere near as much excitement in the space as there is now. It was sort of a sleepy industry. And I really got to say, I didn't have the force. I didn't even know it was going to be as big as it became, but, got lucky, I suppose. But really what happened, to answer your question, is, I'm trying to remember. This was as I was building kind of the initial versions of Zencaster that started to blow up and really the wave kind of built. And it was because you had podcasts like Serial and This American Life, I think, were the two sort of breakouts that happened in 2016-ish.
Yeah.
Where they suddenly were getting millions of I think it was Serial hit a milestone where they got 1 million downloads per episode. And they were hitting that regularly. And then everybody's head started to turn whoa, there's actually, that's a lot of eyes. That's a lot of brand impressions from an advertiser perspective.
Yeah.
And so people realize, hey, there's gold in those hills if there's going to be, that many people interested. As you mentioned, in the United States alone, 60+% are listening monthly, if not more, and it's just continuing to grow. And if you look at I think I just saw the brand spend projections. It was projected to be, the market size tripling by 2023 to 3-point-something billion. Now the new projection is by 2026, it's going to be 6-point-something billion, another doubling. So it's hitting a exponential growth curve. And it's really just because so many people are interested in podcast content. It fits into their day in a way that many other mediums can't and don't. You can listen to it while you do your laundry, while you're exercising, while you're driving. And that's a lot of time that people are spending listening to content, and a lot of opportunity for creators and brands to get in front of people.
Yeah. So I'm very familiar with Zencaster because I've been using it since I started the show in 2018. But maybe for those a little less familiar, can you give a little background on what exactly the platform is and does, and how do you differentiate it?
Yeah, of course. Great question to provide some context there. Back in those days, and the way I got keyed onto this market was I I was actually working on a totally different company in the audio space. It was around music and helping electronic musicians collaborate together online. Didn't work out for many reasons, but someone said, hey, podcasters have this problem getting high quality assets back and forth. Maybe you can help there. I honestly sat on that for a few years because I was focused on something else, but it always stuck in the back of my head. And I started looking into that problem, and I realized that podcasters at that time were using mostly Skype to do remote recordings. And most podcasters had either a remote co-host or a remote guest on most of their episodes. It's really hard to get to find like all the top performing people in your hometown that are going to come to your house, right? So you got to
trust me, I know.
Yeah. So you got to cast a wider net. The problem with that though is that Skype at that time, and now Zoom, which a lot of people use, has the same problem. It records on one end, and so the host might sound really good, but the guest is getting recorded with all of the voice over IP artifacts. Could be compressed. It can sound really robotic. If the internet connection is unstable, it can completely drop out at times. And that is really, really annoying to a podcast audience. Yeah. They'll jump your case on Twitter. They will stop listening to your show if you've just got poor quality audio. It's really annoying to the brain. And so it was a major pain point for podcasters at the time. And we are still, and that was kind of the initial problem and the initial entry point that we solved. Long answer to your question was a double-ended recording solution. So you send a link to whoever you want to record with. It records them locally on their end, records you locally on your end, and then we mix those tracks together after the fact. So that you have a really high-quality recording on both sides that is easy on the listener ears and sounds great and professional. And I should add, that was our entry to market. Now we've expanded and we realize there's a lot of other problems in helping podcasters create high quality content. And so now we're helping them produce the content, distribute it, grow the audience, and also find monetization.
Yeah. And I wanted to follow up with that anyway, because, you started Zencaster in 2015. There was, I think it was audio only, and, the limited set of features, even though they were much needed features. But, can you talk a little bit about, those early days versus now? What's changed both in the platform, but also just from how you're seeing people use the platform?
Yeah, I mean, the market is just blowing up. It's white hot, and that's been a big change. A lot more interest, a lot more bigger players in the market, a lot more people coming from other mediums to get into podcasting as well. It's starting to become just another arrow, like a necessary arrow in your quiver of your content marketing strategy. And for a lot of people, the most powerful part of that. But, I just went to the podcast movement conference about a month ago. And one of the big things that I noticed there, and a big shift that's happening now in the industry, is we're starting to it used to be sort of podcasting as a it was sort of, if you had a podcast, it was oftentimes mostly a passion project. Yeah. You were probably spending out of your pocket to do this. You weren't making a lot of money, if any. And sometimes you're spending, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a year on all the tools and services around it. Yeah. Now what's starting to happen, now that you're getting creators from, YouTube and other platforms getting into podcasting, the expectations are changing to where it's more of a, instead of I'm going to pay you for your service, it's like, hey, how are you going to help me make money? And how are we going to make money together? And I think that's actually a great transition in the space. It's a much needed thing. Most of these podcasters should be getting rewarded for the value that they're providing into the ecosystem. Okay. And a way that I kind of describe what we're trying to build is the YouTube for podcasts. If you're on YouTube and you've got over 1,000 downloads a month, there's a button you can push, and now you're monetizing. You're in a rev share agreement with YouTube. You're making money, and some of these guys are making a lot of money, and that doesn't exist in podcasting right now, and it really should. And there's no reason why it can't. It's been proven in other mediums, and that's what we've built at Zencaster and are leaning heavily into. We believe that if you're a creator, you should be able to create and be rewarded for the time and effort you're putting into it. And there's a lot of people out there to listen, a lot of brands out there that are looking for more channels to grow, and podcasting is a great option there. Yeah. So that's a big shift that I've seen that's been happening. And now if you go to the conference, that's where the money is at. Like that's where, the service companies are in the small booths, and then the advertising companies are renting out the galleries and throwing the big parties.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, do you see that as kind of I would say that's a maturing industry, right? Is that kind of how you would characterize it?
The podcast ad market?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's still very Wild West. I think it's still even too early to call it maturing. Yeah. Like it's all over the place, and a lot of opportunity, a lot of, for example, we'll go talk to some of our creators, and we'll just ask them an open-ended question like, what does it cost to run an ad on your podcast, to get a sense of how people are valuing themselves and the content. And you'll get answers anywhere from like a 5-cent CPM to a $500 CPM. And it's just because the market is so all over the place right now. And that's not a bad thing. It just means like there's a lot of work to be done to actually help people figure out how to actually make money, and also not waste a ton of time. That's another big thing, like not just monetization, but if a podcast takes you 6 hours per episode, which is what our current users are, or not so current, but like old surveys we used to do before we started building all this product, that was the answer, average of 6 hours. Some people are spending a lot more time. And so just bringing that time to a creation down, and also making it so that it's valuable for the creators, is really a big part of what I think the podcasting market needs. There's so many people that try to get into podcasting every day, hundreds, if not thousands probably, and very few of them actually make it out of the other end of producing content and continuously making a show. It's not because they don't want to. It's not because they don't have talent. It's just it can be really hard and difficult without the right tool chain and the right help to not only help you create the content quickly, find your audience, and then start kicking on the money as well, without having to be everything to everyone. Like right now, so many podcasters are trying to be a marketer, a podcast host, ad sales broker, social media, and nobody can really do all of that stuff well on their own. You kind of have to focus, but so many are being pulled in those directions right now.
Totally agree. And I think that's where it is kind of pointing to what you were saying earlier. It's got some room to mature, surely, as a communication tool, and as an industry, even though it is being used so prevalently. As far as content goes, I mean, I think that's certainly a key thing. I mean, you can have the greatest team in the world, but if the content of the show is not compelling and everything, it's not going to get that audience that is going to stick with it. What have you seen in terms of trends and content? I mean, I know there's more podcasts than ever, so probably more diverse content, but are there any things that you're seeing, and maybe just to focus that question, content as far as those brands and those marketers out there that are looking to get into podcasting, like any trends that you're seeing there?
One thing I'm seeing is just more and more brands are getting into it in one way or another. Yeah. I'm always sort of surprised at the different kinds of content, and there's just such a diverse array of all different kinds of interests that I couldn't even tell you. There's the obvious ones, like true crime is hot, right? Yeah. I think everybody knows that. But aside from that, we try not to focus too much on like what the content is, but just helping give everybody the tooling that they need. As far as like trends, I think it's just a lot of it is just this move towards people be kind of a creator economy that you're seeing happen in other places is definitely strong in the podcasting now. People are coming into podcasting, not so much like, obviously they have passion, but it's also with an expectation that they're going to be able to build a business out of this. Yeah. And that's kind of the goals they're coming into. Podcasters are very entrepreneurial people. very strong-willed, the ones especially that are successful now because and in the past because it's not been an easy road to walk down. And now we're just seeing there's a lot of demand for people to come in and build a business out of podcasting, by and large.
Yeah, great. So what's on your roadmap with Zencaster? What do you see in the next couple of years ahead?
Well, as I mentioned, we've recently launched the full creation suite, not just recording, but production and editing, promotion, and monetization. Further down the road, I think we're leaning pretty heavily right now into helping them monetize through advertising. It's sort of clearly everybody wants to do that in some way, but there's a lot of other options I think that make sense for podcasters to monetize with that you're seeing a lot of people are already engaging with, which is like private RSS feeds, backer programs. You're seeing like live streams and like paid kind of other sorts of events. Also like merch, there's all different ways that you can monetize. And I think if you're a new podcaster and you're growing, getting off the ground, you may have a better, easier time making money with a backer program. I've talked to some podcasters that have, maybe 5,000 downloads a month or less, but they've got a really strong, loyal audience and a backer program, and like 500 of their audience members a month are paying them as part of a backer program, and they're making real money off of it.
Nice.
And that's a really high engagement rate. You're not going to get that out of an ad, right? And so I think depending on your content, depending on the size of your show, there's different monetization options that make sense for that stage. And we want to be there to serve in all of those different areas. So that's some of where our head's at moving forward, is not just monetizing through advertising, but finding all of the different ways that you can provide value to your audience and provide a deeper connection there that's going to be valuable for them.
Yeah, that's great. Well, one last question before we wrap up here. For someone that is considering starting a podcast, maybe they're an individual, maybe they're a brand even, but what's one piece of advice that you would have for them as they're, they haven't even gotten started yet, but as they're planning and thinking ahead, what would you advise them to start with?
That's a great question. I think part of it is like, you can spend a lot of time theorizing about what your podcast is going to be, what you want it to be about, the theme, I guess, whatever. I tend to be on the side of like, you'll figure that out as you go. Yeah. And there might be some throwaway episodes, or you might find that the theme or that you started off with is not really what you're ultimately interested in talking about every week, and you could go in a different direction. And I think and this is really just maybe entrepreneurial advice in general, is like, just get started, start putting some recordings down and see what works, rather than trying to figure it out all at once. And obviously come to Zencastr.com. We'd love to help you.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I got to say, just from my own experience, I did just that. So my first year doing my show, it was just me talking, and I'd recently written a book, and so I just was kind of sharing thoughts in each episode. And it took me a year of episodes to kind of realize, hey, you know what? I did like one or two interviews, and I realized, oh, you know what? I get a lot more engagement when I talk with somebody else and kind of bounce questions off them, as much as I like to hear my own voice. So, totally agree with your thoughts there. And I mean, this is the Agile Brand podcast. And so I definitely believe in a very iterative approach to doing things and improving. So no, I think that's great advice. Really, really appreciate you joining the show today.
Yeah, really happy to be here, Greg. Thank you so much for the invite.
Yeah. Well, again, I'd like to thank Josh Nielsen, founder and CEO of Zencaster, for joining the show. Thanks for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom. Talk with you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.theagilebrand.show. To get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, visit my website at gregkillstrom.com. Until next week, stay agile.